Today we'll take a look at population growth patterns. And if you remember from the last lesson, a population is a group of individuals from the same species that live in the same place and interbreed. There are four main factors that affect the size of a population. The first is the birth rate, which is the number of individuals being born. The second is death rate, which is the number of individuals that are dying. And the third and fourth are immigration and emigration, which sound similar, but they are exact opposites. Immigration with an I, you want to think of as coming into an area. So the number of populations that enter an area. And emigration, you want to think E for exit, is the number of individuals leaving a population or exiting a population. As long as birth rate is larger than death rate and immigration is higher than emigration, a population will grow. If the opposite is true, if the death rate is higher than the birth rate or emigration is higher than immigration, the population will shrink. Exponential growth. This is something that occurs when resources are abundant. There is a lot of food and a lot of space. And what happens is that the individuals will reproduce at a constant rate and the population will slowly start to grow. And you have more individuals reproducing and more individuals reproducing, and then those individuals reproduce. And what happens is as those individuals reproduce, the population is going to grow faster and faster and faster. Population growth will speed up. And what you have is this J-shaped curve that is characteristic of exponential growth. However, this type of growth cannot continue forever. Why not? Because of limiting factors. Limiting factors are factors that keep the size of a population down. And there are two main types, density-dependent factors and density-independent limiting factors. So density-dependent factors depend on density. If you remember from the last lesson, density is the number of individuals divided by the area. So these types of factors include things like resource availability. So when you have a lot of individuals cramped into a small space, you start to run out of resources, things like food. If you have herbivores, they're going to run out of vegetation and grasses. If you have carnivores, they're going to run out of prey items. As resource availability goes down, competition goes up. More competition means that somebody is not going to end up getting food or getting water or getting mates. The other thing that increases as density increases and you have more individuals in a space is the spread of disease and the spread of parasites. Think of it when you're sick and you have a lot of sick people cramped into a small area like a shopping mall, they can spread diseases much more quickly to each other. And that's what happens when the population density goes up. Predation also goes up as population density goes up, and we'll take a look at a unique interaction between predator and prey. So this information, this data was collected on Isle Royale. And what scientists looked at was in orange, this is the moose population, and in blue, this is the wolf population. So what happened is they observed that the moose population was slowly growing, and as the moose population grew, the wolf population grew as well because the wolves had more moose to eat. But what happened here is the wolves overshot. The wolf population got too big, and they ate too many of the moose. So here the moose population is crashing. And in response to that, now you have all these hungry wolves with nothing to eat. The wolf population crashed. And over time, this rise and fall pattern emerged where the predator was following a pattern of the prey, just a little bit lagging. This is a density-dependent limiting factor type of situation. Density-independent factors affect populations regardless of density. These have nothing to do with how cramped or crowded individuals are in a space. This includes things like unusual weather, like drought, for example, or a forest fire, natural disasters, human activities like habitat destruction. And I'm going to show you something just for fun. Flood is another density-independent factor, and here you can see some unfortunate baboons who have to cross this river because of flooding, and they just look really funny doing it. You can tell that water is really cold and they're not happy there. Okay, so that brings us to logistic growth. Over time, population growth tends to slow down because you start to run out of resources, or you start to see more disease because the individuals are too crowded in a small space. And what you see happen is something known as logistic growth. Logistic growth follows this pattern. So it starts off slow, and then you have a brief period of exponential growth right here. And then look what happens here. You have a leveling off. And this point here is called carrying capacity. And we'll discuss what carrying capacity is later on. But at this point, you've reached the maximum number of individuals and you reach a stable population size. And logistic growth has this characteristic S shape. Exponential had a J shape, and logistic has this characteristic S shape. So what is carrying capacity? Carrying capacity is the largest population an environment can support, and it can change when the environment changes. So here is an example. This is a little fish bowl, and the carrying capacity of this fish bowl is 3 fish. That's the number that can fit here and survive. Once you start adding too many fish, the extra fish die off. They don't get enough food, they don't get enough space, the waste build up to toxic levels, and basically fish will end up dying all the way until you get back down to 3 fish, which is the carrying capacity of this environment. And each habitat, each environment has its own carrying capacity, the maximum number of individuals that it can support. And once population exceeds the carrying capacity, individuals will start to die. They will starve, they won't have food, they will get sick, and the population will get down to the carrying capacity. And on a graph, you can see carrying capacity is right here. It's where the population levels off and the numbers don't get any higher. So population crash goes hand in hand with carrying capacity. So what happens when individuals reproduce too rapidly and they go beyond the carrying capacity, like with the fish and in this example here, is when individuals become too numerous and they exceed carrying capacity, you end up having a population crash. So this population basically reproduced out of control. They didn't have enough predators. And once the population was so large, the individuals overgrazed and they basically ended up dying, and the population crashed. You had mass starvation. That is a population crash. Okay, so I want to finish off my discussion of populations today by discussing the population of the Earth. Right now, the population of the Earth is about 7.5 billion people worldwide. That's a lot of people. And you can see population over time has been increasing. And scientists don't actually know what the carrying capacity of the Earth is exactly. They think it's somewhere around 10 billion people, but they're not really sure how many people that the Earth can actually support. And we care about this because if we go above our carrying capacity, we start to destroy parts of the Earth. And as a result, we're going to see, we might see people starving and dying, which is something we don't want to happen.